So thanks, everyone. My name is Pietro Franchi, and I work as a research associate for Right Uganda. What I'm going to present is a study that we've done in partnership with Right to and call a context study, and it was also done in partnership with an organization called Oxford Measure. The focus of the study is on Rwandan primary teachers' experiences with online teacher training and learning through play. So the study comes as a, let's say, preliminary study as a background for the e-certification project, which is a project where Right to Play is aiming to provide online training to lower primary teachers on how to implement learning through play in their classrooms for better student outcomes. We are happy to share more details about the program if anyone has any questions, but due to time, I'm going to skip to the presentation. Also, the presentation is a bit long, so I will skip through some of the slides. Some of them I will not maybe mention. I will go quickly through them, but we're very happy to share the full presentation with anyone who's interested. We've shared it with the FAWE team, so I'm sure they will also be able to share it with the audience if they're interested. So let me just get to it. So I'm going to talk about the approach of the study very quickly, and then I'm going to talk about two types of findings, findings about the context of our sample, and then the actual findings from the focus group discussions, which are at the core of this study. And then I'm going to quickly wrap up with some conclusions and recommendations that we've done. Remember, the study was done in November of last year, so the project now is in a very, very different state, and the e-certification course has already been rolled out. It's been rolled out right now. So we are also happy to share progress about the course and how it's been and how the recommendations have been implemented in the project. So yes, so let me just first start with the objectives of the study and the methodology that we use to address them. In terms of study objectives, we focused on three main goals. The first of them was to understand teacher training participation. So we were trying to understand what were Rwandan teachers' experiences with teacher training in general, and what made them motivated, both from an intrinsic and extrinsic point of view, to participate in training. So like what are the internal and external factors that actually motivate teachers to attend training and to retain the content from the training. The second goal was to understand their experiences with online training. So let's say, tech component. Since this training was to be delivered online, we were trying to understand what were the experiences that they had earlier on, and what were the barriers that Rwandan primary teachers were expecting to face when joining training online. The third goal was to understand the perceptions and their barriers related to implementing learning to play in the classroom, and even if they hadn't used it already, the goal was to understand what is their perceived what are the perceived challenges that they might face when using learning to play in the classroom. So to answer these questions, we used two main components. The first of them was a quantitative listing exercise, which basically involved interviews with 383 lower primary teachers in Rwanda, with 24 head teachers in Rwanda and 12 sector education officers. Since this was a listing data, it was used to create a list from which we could extract teachers to do following studies on. The data we collected was quite basic. It was involving mainly basic demographic information, such as gender, age, the subjects they teach, and some basic information about their access to electronic devices and any experiences they had with training and learning through play. The second component of the study is made of 12 focus group discussions, so qualitative study, done in 4 districts in Rwanda. So we conducted 3 focus group discussions for each district, one with only female teachers, one with only male teachers, in both cases a mix between urban and rural teachers, and then one focus group discussion for each district with head teachers and sector education officers. So the focus group discussions were focusing first on teacher training. One group was assigned to discuss teacher training in general. The other group was assigned to discuss online teacher training. And then the second focus of the focus groups was to discuss learning interplay in the classroom. So let me just dive into the results for time. So I'm first going to present the results from the listing exercise, so the quantitative findings that we have from the basic information that we collected out of all the 383 lower primary teachers. So in terms of age, we found that the teachers in our sample were spanning from all ages, from around 18 to over 60 years old, with a mean of around 35 years old for teachers. The vast majority of the sample was made of female teachers, 74%, and most teachers were found to teach multiple subjects, the most common subjects being Rwanda, so the local language, mathematics, and then English. In terms of access to electronic devices, which is something that we're very interested in here because of the online training component, we found somewhat surprisingly that female teachers had usually more access to smartphones compared to male teachers. And that was the only difference that we found by gender, while access to computers and tablets was generally the same across female and male teachers. So a similar difference was observed for teachers living in urban areas. So teachers living in urban areas had more frequent access, or they were more likely to have any access to smartphones, 84%, compared to 70% of teachers in rural areas who had access to smartphones. Access to computers like the same also for urban and rural areas. But as you can see from the graph on the right, teachers living in rural areas were also much more likely to have access to no devices at all. So 26% of teachers in rural areas didn't have any access to any device, while only 6% of teachers in urban areas did so. When it comes to exposure to online and play-based training, we observed no clear pattern. So it was roughly the same across male and female teachers, with male teachers receiving slightly more often play-based training. And then there was no clear pattern by urban and rural area. Yeah, so let me just stop right there for that. And when it comes to access to electronic devices by district, we observed quite constant access to any electronic device. So basically either a computer or a smartphone or a tablet for 3 of the 4 districts. But then for the district of Ngororero, which is a rural district in the east of Rwanda, with usually higher poverty rates, then we observed that access to any electronic device was much lower there, 56% compared to around 85% in the other districts. This is also reflected by lower attendance to online training in that district, 4% compared to at least 10% in the others. While we did see much higher attendance of online training in a district of Musanze, which probably reflects the fact that some NGOs or government interventions probably focused more on that district before. Finally, when it comes to online training, and this is somewhat an unsurprising finding, but still interesting to display, is that if we look at attendance of online training by access to devices, we see that teachers that had regular access to any electronic device were much more likely to have attended online training. Those that didn't have regular access to electronic devices had much more access to online training, as it makes sense, right? Because they obviously need access to any device to be able to get online. There was no, let's say, significant or big difference when it comes to play-based training for those 2 groups. So let me now jump into the findings from the focus group discussions. So the qualitative part of our study. So as I was mentioning earlier, one of the goals of the focus group discussions was to understand what are the factors that motivate teachers to participate in training, both in person and online. And as we can see from this graph, so you can see that the results are lumped together between online training and teacher training with 2 different colors. And in the factors that would make teachers interested in or excited to participate in training, we see that accessibility is probably the most common reason that was mentioned. Many teachers mentioned the need to be reimbursed for the training, both in terms of time and resources. And then many teachers also mentioned the need to have IT tools to be able to access online training. So 11 out of 24 groups of teachers mentioned that. Some of them also mentioned the need for teaching materials, and also mentioned that the need to see training as a learning opportunity, which basically means that training needs to be presented as something of high quality and clearly defined goals. So teachers were mentioning, if we have a very clear agenda for training, with a very clear list of things that we will get out of it, then we will be more likely to be excited to participate in the training. While if the training is poorly organized or it's not clear what we would get out of it, then we will be. Let me just skip here for reasons of time. Another question that was asked was the factors that would discourage or stop teachers from participating in training. And the findings kind of mirror what I just presented. They mainly focus on accessibility. The main reason to not participate in training would be to not get enough reimbursements for training, participate. And all teachers in the online training group mentioned that they wouldn't participate if they don't have access to appropriate IT tools. This is also paired with the need that they mentioned to have knowledge of ICT devices. So 5 out of 12 teacher groups in the online training group mentioned the need to get some kind of ICT training because they would not be familiar with them to be able to access the online training. Other reasons that were mentioned as barriers that are quite interesting, I think, are about time management and schedules, which are still about accessibility. So many teachers mentioned that if training is to be scheduled during class hours and during the weekends, then they wouldn't be able to attend. And even if the training is not well managed in terms of time, then it will be an obstacle for them because they will have trouble, let's say, attending training while managing classes. Another reason that was mentioned that is quite interesting is the language barrier. Because due to the different distribution of age of teachers in the sample, some of the teachers speak French because that was the language in Rwanda before around 2000, while some of the younger teachers only speak English. So they mentioned the need to have training delivered in a language that they would both understand. When it comes to inclusive training for male and female teachers, we were asking which factors would help both male and female teachers benefit. There were less clear answers in this sense. The agreement was generally to support trainees or teachers that are mothers or that have childcare duties, so to support them to attend training. And then some groups mentioned the need to have an inclusive methodology, so basically to have content that is tailored for both men and women. Let's dive into the results for play-based training, since we don't have a lot of time. So the second section, the focus group discussions, was mentioning on learning to play and applying it to the classroom. So when most teachers were asked, what does learning to play mean? Many of them focused on very, very concrete activities. So they focused on the use of games and songs in the classes. And many of them also mentioned the outcomes that they perceive from learning to play, which basically and then also enjoying classes. So the view of learning to play by teachers is still revolving around the use of games and tools to basically make, like the use of very specific activities in the class. When they were asked if they were feeling ready to deliver learning to play in the classroom, the vast majority of teachers said that they were not ready. Some of them said not sure. And the main factors that were quoting as barriers were basically lack of resources, because many of them felt that they needed teaching aids to be able to deliver games in the classroom. And then also lack of capabilities of knowledge, because many teachers were just not very familiar with how to implement learning to play in the classroom. The follow-up of this, when asked about the main barriers in delivering learning to play in the classroom, many teachers mentioned some resource constraints that they had. So basically, the mentioned was the issue of overcrowded classrooms, which would make it very hard for teachers to organize games with a lot of children in a very small environment. And then the other reasons that were mentioned or barriers were mainly around lack of resources and of teaching aids, basically what I was mentioning, lack of teacher, something I already mentioned, and also curriculum constraints. So some teachers were mentioning the barrier of having to use learning to play while having to meet. They don't include learning to play as a teaching tool. So they were afraid basically of losing time by organizing a game while they have to basically meet very strict curriculum demands. When asked about inclusivity, so basically the barriers to using learning to play for both male and female children, most teachers didn't mention any specific challenges or barriers with respect to gender. So they said that there are no specific barriers for girls, for example, compared to boys. But what most teachers focus about are barriers related to disability. So basically, many of them mentioned the challenge of having to adapt games for children with disabilities, both in terms of having to include them, but also on the knowledge that teachers have. For 2 minutes, so let me just jump to so when I asked about, so was about teachers participating in teacher training through EdTech, and we saw that the main barriers to extrinsic motivation have to do with accessibility, both in terms of location and timing of training. So features that make training accessible, including making the location is not too far from their school, etc. When it comes to intrinsic motivation, basically the main focus was on having a clear and consistent plan, and by having competent trainers that also emphasize how the content of the training can be applied in real life, basically. In terms of the needs for teachers to attend blended or online training, so the technology component, the main make sure to bridge the gap of some teachers. So what our recommendation was to basically make it flexible for them to be able to access training from home or from maybe shared devices, and also to include an optional introductory module so that teachers that are less familiar with ICT could have kind of a catch-up or a crash course on how to use technology before actually accessing the course. Another conclusion in terms of online training was to basically have to replicate some in-person training. So any strategy would make training a bit more interactive. So for example, the use of visual aids, the use of interactive components, then would make training more enjoyable for teachers, basically making up for the online component, which can create a barrier for understanding. So lastly, in terms of understanding of learning to play in the classroom, as I was mentioning, the view of teachers that teachers have in terms of learning to play is mainly instrumental. Like we see is the use of games, a very specific creating an atmosphere of play that also makes sure that children are involved in the classroom, in making the classroom a bit collaborative across children. So this should be made, has been made a focus of the course. And the other takeaway is of resources, which basically drove us to recommend that training should basically tailor the content resource constrained situations. For example, in the training, they should also emphasize how do you deliver learning to play in a context where resources are very low and classrooms are overcrowded, for example. So let me just stop right there. I know I am slightly over time, so apologize for that. So yeah, thanks everyone for attending our presentation. We'll be happy to take any questions you have about the project and the study.
Thank you, Pietro. Stay online for the discussion and questions that later on. The next presentation will be from Saltetti. 15 minutes. Please watch me for rounding up.
Hello, everyone. Actually, Saltetti is my surname. My name is Fausto. I'm Italian as well as Pietro. I just need my presentation to be plugged. Well, the track is on technology enhanced learning. I'm going to disappoint you because I'm not going to talk about technology at all. What I'm going to do, I'm going to provide you with a framework with a much broader perspective on how you can integrate technology and how you can leverage technology when it comes to online learning and digital facilitation. Oh, does it work? No? We have a problem with the clicker. So, as I was saying, a bit of context. My name is Fausto Saltetti. I work for the International Training Center of the ILO, which is a United Nations agency based in Turin. We focus on learning and training. And if the presentation, oh, there you go. We have a physical campus in Turin. This is our brand new innovation lab. And we do deliver training for governments, NGO, different type of organization. The peculiar part of the Turing learning approach is that we want to have fun. We want to have participants really be engaged and really be triggered by the learning experience. And as you can see in this picture, participants are having fun while learning at the ITC ILO. Now, the problem with the COVID and with the digitalization of learning is how can you replicate this model into the online learning environment? And of course, you cannot only focus on the technology, because we should be looking at technology as a tool, as an enabler. But of course, you have to think about other different type of aspect that comes into play when organizing experiences. So for us, it was not really, the question was not how we can select the technology, the right technology. It was more how we effectively deliver training that are meaningful and effective for people, and how can human component into the online experience. How can we do that? Technology is just a tool. We need to focus on methodology and pedagogy. I'd like to take your phone. What are the key performance indicators that are using to assess the effectiveness of an online learning experience? A question for you: scan the QR code or open the browser, join slido.com, and then add the code 1245693. So scan the QR code or type in the browser slido.com and then use the code 1245693. The question is, one KPI to measure effectiveness of digital learning. According to you, how can you measure the effectiveness of digital learning? The QR code is still there. Don't let me down. I want at least one answer, one KPI. Oh, that's the code. Is it about assessment? Is it about the feedback? Is it about the engagement? Two participants are typing. Assessment. So either formative or summative assessment. Okay, that was actually a tricky question, because at the ITC ILO, KPIs stand for keeping people interested, meaning that We need to create and shape online learning experiences that are triggering attention through different types of instructional design methodology, such as gamification or storytelling, or really creative, engaging, captivating narrative. Also, Pietro, I think in his presentation was mentioning the lack of interactivity when it comes to online learning. The second KPI for ITC-ILO, it is that we keep people inspired. We need to trigger emotional connection and cognitive connection. The internal or the external motivation that brings participants to learn, to effectively learn. We really need to inspire people that are connected online. And the third one, it is we need to keep people involved. We need to design participatory online learning experience. We need to move away from what I'm basically doing right now, being the sage on the stage and try to lecture people. We need to be involved, we need to co-create knowledge, and we need to tap into the collective intelligence of the online learning experience. So how do we do that at ITC-ILO? We created 3 different products that are available for online trainers, trainers in general, facilitator, that you can use to really tap into these 3 KPIs, emotional, cognitive, and participatory learning. The first one, it is an online tool that is available in English, French, and Spanish. Anyone can access it. It is a repository of online methodologies that you can use to facilitate this one works. So the ITC-ILO online digital learning toolkit is a repository of online methodologies that you can use to facilitate webinars, to facilitate online learning experiences. Whether you are a trainer, whether you are a facilitator, and you need to come up with a new session outline for your next webinar or your next online events, go to the website and browse all the tools that you have available. You will make sure that at the end of your presentation, you will have an effective online learning experience. Also because it really brings the engagement of participants at the center. The second one, it is a publication and is actually a framework of action that we always embed in our work. And how can we make sure that everyone has equal access to content and technology? It provides a perspective on 4 different thematics. So from a policy perspective, from a technological perspective, content perspective, and the 4th one I forgot. And it provides 42 actionable feedback that can be easily implemented when we are talking about digital education, okay? So bridge the gap from different directions. And I have 2 publications available here. The last product that we have is actually a bit contradictory with digital education because it is called Slow Learning Movement. And it kind of like look at the fact that we are overly exposed to digital technology and overly exposed to digital information. And the core of this publication, it is how can we slow down? How can we let learning sink? And we can kind of like take a pause from this digital ecosystem that we are completely exposed on a daily basis. And this publication provides several tips and actionable tools that you can use in your next digital learning activity.
Recording in
that
progress.
Really brings this element of reflection and mindful questioning on the future of learning. I also have this publication available for you if you want to have a look at it. Now, our claim is that people need other people to learn. So by having these 3 components in mind and by using these 3 different tools that we have available, we can really achieve these. We can really bring together all the participants, all the learners, all the teachers, and having a kind of like meaningful way of thinking of a new learning approach. People need other people to learn, but also teachers need other teachers to learn, and facilitators need other facilitators to learn. To conclude, do you know what's the concept of Ma? Ma is a Japanese word that stands for having a pause, taking a break. And that's something that we always do and we always include in our activity. We don't want to overwhelm our participants. We do not want to overwhelm our learners. We always ask to take a pause and reflect on what has just been shared. So what I'm going to do is to ask you to reflect on this presentation for 30 seconds and then go back to your smartphone and type one key takeaway from the presentation. So 30 seconds, let the presentation speak, the information seeing. If you want to close your eyes, it's always nice to have some background music. 30 seconds to reflect, and then share one key takeaway. Not the code. We need to go details of this learning absolutely we need to create a platform for learners to be able to learn in that space. Online learning can be fun, must be fun. Willingness, exposure, guys. KPIs is not necessarily key performance indicator, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's go back to the case, since it's actually keep people interested, keep people inspired, keep people involved. Let's speak about these KPIs and design. How much did it take? Well,
Thank you, Mr. Saltetti. The next presentation will be from Mr. Christen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending this presentation. I'll try retaining the presenters. If we can have the slide deck project. So the presentation today is titled Unlocking Potential Technology in Rwanda. This is joint work with my colleague Jonathan Bauer, who is director at Latrite Rwanda. I'm Julian Christen, research associate at Latrite Rwanda. So the presentation was from my colleague from Uganda before. This study was conducted by Latrite and was funded by the Commission. So this plan for today, we'll start by presenting the objectives and the method that we used in the study. Then we'll present the findings on the ecosystem. And then we will present 3 different types of perceptions for stakeholders. So on the general issues, as well as on the supply and demand and the demand side challenges and constraints faced. And we'll wrap up with some key messages that emerged from this study. Can you go to the next slide, please? we had four main objectives with this study. So the first one was to and who the stakeholders are in Rwanda, in the sector, the government, and then it was to get their perceptions on several of their supply side and demand side factors and challenges. So those are supply side factors and demand side factors that were highlighted by the respondents. We'll discuss them in more details a bit later in the presentation. We followed so we started with a thorough review on EdTech in East Africa. That included reviewing, for example, statistical yearbook from Rwanda. We then conducted 32 key informant interviews. In those interviews, we asked questions to respondents about the definition of EdTech, the stage of EdTech in Rwanda. Then, depending on the types of respondents, so the first we asked them about the products and platform that they create, and for NGOs, government partners, development partners, we ask questions on how they engage with EdTech in Rwanda. We then analyzed those results by looking for common themes across all the respondents, and then we presented those results in the context of a workshop that 2022 Kigali, that brought together 80 EdTech stakeholders, as well as the Minister of State in charge of ICT and TVET. And based on the results from the analysis, plus the feedback from the participants to the workshop, we produced a 60-page paper. Respondents were a mix of education and ICT stakeholders in government, EdTech firms, higher learning institutions, and development partners and NGOs. We were provided a list of EdTech firms by the ICT Chamber, and a list of development and government partners provided by the Ministry of Education. And from that initial list, we used a snowball sampling method where every time a respondent was pointing us to someone else to interview, then we were reaching out to that firm or development partner to also try to include them in the interviews. So let's start with the first objective. That was understanding the EdTech ecosystem and the stakeholders in Rwanda. So the EdTech ecosystem, to be conducive, it needs a few enabling factors. So EdTech is not just good content delivery, but it's a very complex ecosystem that relies on interrelated components. There's a need for policy and government framework to unlock streams of funding and financing to promote innovation. There's a need for human capital and digital skills. There's a need for openness to technology, understanding that this can enhance education, and that this is very useful in the context of the Rwandan education system. And finally, there needs to be enough purchasing power from the end users. On top of those enabling factors, there are also a few key components that need to be in place to create a conducive EdTech environment. Infrastructure and hardware are two of those components. The delivery mode needs to be fit for purpose. We need quality content. And finally, we need to provide support to learners and teachers on how to use the technological solutions in the classroom. Now let's talk a bit about the stakeholders, so the participants in the interviews. So the initiatives led by those firms or NGOs tackle a range of subjects. They tackle all levels, from pre-primary to higher learning institutions, and all groups also of end users, so students, teachers, parents, as well as management and professionals. We had 17 firms in our sample, 8 of which started operations in 2020. So that was in the context of COVID-19. So COVID-19 really boosted the sector. firms, edtech firms are very small. 13 out of the 17 had less than 10 employees. The number and nature of edtech users per firm varies widely. You can see from 100 to 600,000. This is also because the definition of an end user in the context of edtech can be very different. So it can be someone who accessed USSD content on their phone once, and it can be a teacher that took a comprehensive online learning course. And finally, that's an important finding, I think, that grant funding is still the dominant form of resourcing. But the respondents to the interviews were actually mentioned that there's an increasing number of firms that generate revenue through business-to-business model, so less reliant on grant funding. So what do those edtech stakeholders actually work on? Mostly on content creation and also on platform hosting, something like Moodle type of. Providing technical assistance and training as well. And finally, education management systems, hardware, and infrastructure and connectivity. It's important to note that for hardware and infrastructure and connectivity, those two sectors require a high investment, so this is why maybe there are less actors in those sectors. Now let's move on to the second objective. So understanding edtech stakeholders' perceptions on the status of the sector in Rwanda. Edtech in Rwanda is still at an early stage, but we see encouraging signs. COVID was really a catalyst. It boosted the sector, that's for sure. A respondent said that thanks to edtech, the education system actually survived in Rwanda during that period. All levels of education are seeking to expand e-learning, so as I mentioned before, from pre-primary to higher learning institutions. And yeah, digital infrastructure improved a lot over the last 10 years, but yeah, there's still a way to go. And the products are not yet mainstream, so not accessible to everyone. So the enabling factors that I mentioned above, we saw some improvements in terms of infrastructure, a huge increase in the rate of primary schools that were connected to the grid. A third of all teachers were trained in digital literacy. There's openness from the government towards edtech, and COVID-19 in that sense really showed the importance of technology. Digital management tools are being used more and more in schools. So systems like educational management information systems or teacher management information systems. There are initiatives going on between universities, the government and edtech firms on national learning platforms. And finally, there's an expanding use. So smart classrooms are expanding. So those are classrooms where teachers are equipped with a tablet that helps them with lesson plans, for example. But there are still opportunities for edtech that we could leverage on. For example, edtech can help teach all subjects. In the case of hands-on subjects, edtech could be a supplement to actual physical training. It can boost learning through digital lessons plan. There's the case of Rwanda Equip. So that was an intervention that proved to be successful in improving learning outcomes in Kenya. It's being replicated now in Rwanda. And also pre-prepared digital lesson plans would save teachers time, so they would be able to invest more time actually in teaching. EdTech can make learning more inclusive. It would be useful for example, remedial learning, rapid assessment of learning needs, and teaching at the right level. And if we use USSD, it can be used in low-tech settings as well. And finally, the EdTech can make the education system more efficient. It can better support teachers. It's easily scalable as well. And it can generate data that can be later used for decision making. The third objective was to understand the perception of supply-side factors and challenges. Respondents highlighted a few supply-side challenges that they were facing. In terms of resources, as was mentioned before, so financial and funding challenges, EdTech actors are still dependent on development partners aid or government aid. This can be shown in the two quotes here. So they need to be supported by the government. There is a need for more clarity on the policy framework. There is an EdTech policy that is currently being drafted. It's not out yet. There's a need as well for a forum where EdTech firms can interact with EdTech actors in the government, among development partners. There is a need also to make the approval process, the procurement process, so the regulation process more easy to navigate for the actors. And finally, in terms of skills available in Rwanda, there are a few specialized skills that are not available, and yet there's no training available in country for those skills. Infrastructure, of course, still remains an important supply side challenge, especially in terms of access to electricity, internet and devices. There's been improvement, but it's still not universal across the country. Here's a map with the percentage of schools that have access to internet, grid electricity and tap water. We see that there's no clear pattern in terms of rural versus urban difference, but it's still very patchy across the country. Now, moving on to demand side factors and challenges. If you can move to the
recording in progress.
Next slide. The main demand side factor is actually willingness to pay and purchasing power as well. It's still very low from all end users, parents, university students, educational institutions. This quote here says that, yeah, students attending university are on government scholarships, so they won't be able to afford to use EdTech products, and people in companies and public institutions are do not expect to pay for training. I think this was reflected in Pietro's presentation before. So people expect to be reimbursed. Some respondents even said that people expect to be paid to participate in trainings. And there is a digital divide across 4 dimensions: rural versus urban, primary versus secondary schools, public versus private schools, and poor versus non-poor areas, with private schools, for example, having more resources to access digital tools. It wasn't mentioned by respondents, the gender divide, and I think it was also reflected in Pietro's presentation that there was no difference in access to digital tools according to the gender of the end users. So yeah, this was something that was confirmed in our case. There are some policy options that could help bridge this digital divide. For example, harmonizing access to electricity, device, and internet, building the skills to make EdTech more inclusive. So, for example, by making it more accessible for people with disabilities, by deploying gender-responsive pedagogy as well, deploying EdTech solutions that standardize the lessons. That's what Rwanda Equip does, and also EdTech solutions that teach at the right level. Harmonizing student opportunities to improve digital literacy, help addressing the digital divide explicitly in policy and practice, and strengthen policy on child safeguarding in EdTech. So, conclusion, I think 6 key messages emerged from this study. The first one is that there is momentum at the moment. There's political will to create a strong and inclusive EdTech industry in Rwanda. EdTech is a complex ecosystem that relies on enabling factors. Coordination is needed. EdTech firms during the workshop, they expressed their interest to be consulted when it comes to drafting policies. Supply side challenges, so yeah, as we saw, there's ongoing need for funding, infrastructure, devices, skills, and training. Demand side challenges, as we saw, low purchasing power is still a constraint, lack of awareness, and the digital divide. And finally, yeah, policy can really boost inclusion if it's done the right way. So I think now we will have time to take some questions. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Christen. I think at this moment in time, I hear we have 15 minutes left, unfortunately, but at least we had time to actually appreciate the presentations that were done. So quickly, I'll start with, so it means if for 15 minutes, let's press 555 or less so that we can have 1 or 2 questions from the plenary. Starting with Dr. Meima, I think from you, just maybe if we can, from the presentations that have been done, the issue of how far Liberia has progressed with regards to technology usage in education and where you see the gaps and how they can be closed.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the presenters. I come from Liberia, so for us, we use a practical mentor during COVID. In Liberia, everyone do not have access to computers, but everyone have access to radios and telephones. We may not have access to this, but we have what we call a button telephone, the simple telephones. So what we did during COVID to get kids back to learning activities, the government of Liberia adopted the Learning by Radio program. And that program provided a platform where teachers were able to administer lessons on the radios. So, to implement the program, the government worked with teachers, worked with PTAs, worked with radio stations, and also worked with the parents to design the curriculum, to test the curriculum, and to roll it out. So, what was done was that it captured grades from 1st grade to 12th grade. And because there were resource constraints, so it only did 2 subjects, English and math. And this program, what it provided was that it benefited everybody, both boys and girls. So it was not discriminatory. Also, it was a new learning process for teachers, because it was something that people had to learn how to sit on the radio, how to speak, and how to teach. So it was a learning process for even the teachers. Also, the national radio station was used to transmit the program everywhere in Liberia, because the national radio station is heard every part of Liberia. Then also the government partnered with some radio stations, local radio stations, to also transmit the program in other communities, rural communities. So students, what was the impact? Students were able to have hope. Because you all know when COVID came, everything shut down, students were home, some girls were getting pregnant, students were getting into deviant activities. So the teaching by radio program brought hope to students. that they can get into learning and go back to school. Because I have a son, for example, and many times you are like, so we never go back to school again? And students were anxious to go to school and they were losing hope. So the teaching by radio program brought some hope back to the students and also relieved the parents of what the stress of just having your kids around. They're not going to school. You have peer pressure in the society. They get into different activities. So it provided hope for both the students and the parents. Now, what we have today, we do have the e-learning platform being introduced in the country by some schools and universities, especially in the urban areas, because IT infrastructure is very expensive, and where we have rural communities, even the issue of network is a problem. So it is gradually being expanded in the urban communities by universities and some private schools. Now,
Dr. Maima, I might have to cut you there.
so I'm just saying that technology as a tool for learning gave us different ways, avenues to learn, even adults. It was a learning process for us because when your child was learning, you were forced, if you are not busy, to sit by the radio and help the child to understand the lesson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, for squeezing that in. Now, Diana. Diana, from you, what would you say is your experience with online learning in Kenya? And also, what would you like to see being improved?
Okay, thank you. My name is Diana. I'm a fellow alumni, beneficiary. Okay, as a recipient of most of these online tools, I can say that, let me use my high school for example. We only had 2 computers and we had computer lessons all throughout all the semesters, the whole year. Now we were not allowed to touch them because we would spoil them. But I think that will just bring us back to accessibility, giving us more grants to some of these schools so that we can access more of these online tools. Now, what I would recommend to the implementers who can avail such resources to computer and let them do whatever they can do. You will see that these innovations are going to come out through exploration. So that would just be my recommendation. Thank you.
Kevin, from you, you're a teacher at Light Academy. So how prepared would you say is your school with regards to online learning? What challenges did you face to get where you are? And also, how tech-savvy are the teachers there, including yourself?
Okay, thank you. My name is Kevin Chisaka, an educator at Light Academy. There are many challenges actually that we experienced. We can all agree that digital world has continued to revolve, and education is no exception. First of all, we had the challenge of teacher preparedness, or I can say that digital readiness. For example, when COVID came in, it was abrupt actually, and it caught many teachers, students, even parents unawares. So it was a challenge. And what we did to make sure that this seamless flow of transition into digital world from the normal one, we had online learning. At first, it was a bit hectic because some of us even had no access to computers. But thanks to Light Academy, where, many teachers and educators can now access computers. I can say the second challenge was equity and access to equity and access challenges. For example, it was so evident that during COVID-19, after the students had gone back at home, we can all agree that those students, others come from marginalized areas, others come from rural areas, urban areas, and we needed to fill that gap in order to have equity and equality in education. So it was a challenge, actually. It was a challenge. So those students who have access to computers, maybe smartphones, were disadvantaged. And unfortunately, we had no inclusive education because of the gap. So we needed a flexible us as teachers and educators, we needed accessible, flexible, and adaptive methods to adapt into this world. So what did we do? Sometimes teaching online can be hectic. For example, you ask a student of course you don't know, maybe you can't see him or her. So what we did, teachers sometimes can be boring according to students, actually. Yes. So what we did, you break the content into chunks. For example, let's say you're teaching chemistry. You don't teach chemistry broader knowledge in chemistry. You break into chunks, into smaller chunks. Then you keep learning interactive. For example, you ask the students a question, they answer, and so on and so on. Third, value the students. Yes, because actually learning is through learner-centered. It's not teacher-centered. So value them. Don't shut them up because the students get motivated by that. Another thing, be patient with them. Yes, be patient with them, listen to them, and actually, students, as the second presentation we had from that, students will be interested, students will be inspired, and students will be involved in digital learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think we have time as we wait for the other people to finish off. So we'll take questions for all the three presentations, Pietro, Mr. Saltetti, Mr. Christen. Questions from the floor?
Thank you very much. I have this concern. Anyone can respond to it from the presenters. The first concern is the challenges that come with technology. I've realized that it's affecting people's eyes. If you spend so much time on the computer, on the laptop, it's affecting the eyes. It's also affecting even the sitting. You sit so much to watch, and as much as we are advocating for technology, about the health issues that might arise with regards to the use of technology? And secondly, also there is a concern that technology could replace human, and the teachers in the field are worried. What will happen when the human component is removed and people just decide to go the machine way? Will there be a loss in terms of jobs for teachers? And how about loss of humanity, the human element in learning? So I have those concerns. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the questions. For the first one, I mean, I think my answer could be related for both questions, because the way I see EdTech is not replacing the human component, that is not spending the day on a computer. It would be, you know, helping teachers, for example, with lessons planned, like standardizing the lessons so they would have access to a tablet. Yeah. Yeah, because I don't think that making it less interactive would be a problem. So for example, if people were spending their whole day on the computer, it would become very boring as well. So this would not improve. It would probably where the human component is important. So yeah, that answers both questions if this is clear. Yeah.
On the technology and health issues, well, definitely, especially because it gives you like tips and tricks on how you can still creating online learning experiences without being connected. And also what I was thinking related to technology is that we always believe that technology comes through laptop or comes through Zoom, the technology that needs to be used. However, we always forget there are other types of technology that we can leverage. Oh, sorry. That there are other types of technology that we can leverage, for example, podcast. No, that could be a completely different strategy and a completely different approach to online learning. When it comes to technology that is going to replace human, that's super interesting because I'm working on artificial intelligence. And that's always like the discussion around artificial intelligence is going to be, it's always like very polarized. Teachers are going to be fully replaced, or artificial intelligence is going to enhance teacher and really complement teachers. I don't have an answer. Definitely, I do not believe that that AI is going to take over on teachers. Definitely, it's going to complement the work that they're going to do. Probably what we need to see is a kind of like shift in the teacher skills. That definitely is going to be maybe, I'm just assuming, making assumption, maybe on more like on the curator side, rather than the person that is really creating the content, because the content can be created by AI based on the input of the teacher. Just, of course, like making assumption. But probably what we need to see is a shift in the role of teacher that can be enhanced by artificial intelligence. So maybe we should look at artificial intelligence as an extension of the teacher, rather than substituting teachers.
Okay, thank you. Can we have another question? Also, Pietro, feel free to come in if you have any contribution. Second question, Mike.
Thank you very much. My name is Lilian Kaivilu from Kenya. A question to Christen. Yes, how are you integrating learners living with disabilities in EdTech? Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, the study that we did, we interviewed respondents who were edtech firms, so not end users. But what was mentioned by the participants in the interviews were that edtech could be an inclusive way of education. So, and that needs to be thought through as well when creators develop, for example, digital content. They need to include, they need to make sure that they make it inclusive. Yeah.
I was just curious whether you found any significant inclusion at the time of your study.
I don't recall one specific actor that was targeting specifically disabled students, for example. So yeah, I don't have an answer for that. Sorry.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation and the presenters. However, I have a concern that we need to be guided. How are we going to collaborate in as far as meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals and open science being a good for everyone, Sustainable Goal Development number 17, which talks about partnerships. How are we ready to work together? Can we have a generic MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, such Yes, I am saying that for us to work together, you have presented there is an issue of financing, but then some countries or some institutions are already above others. Why don't we work with MOUs and we share the scarce resources and be able to deliver on our mandates and make sure that that the high-tech technology can reach everyone and all institutions and inclusive education goes to all. And I believe this is the right platform to really think through and have MOUs developed so that we work together. Me, I come from institutions, I've been a vice chancellor and I know what it means. And some of these courses can be delivered on shared. We actually share staff. You find one staff is being shared with 4 universities. Why wouldn't you use IT and that one staff can teach 4 universities? If this technology is well developed and we agree that staff can be shared, I want to see your comment and guidance.
Okay, thank you. Who is
Yeah, thanks. That's a very good question. And yeah, this is something that, so I can answer for the context of Rwanda. This is something that every participant said, that the sector is so disintegrated. Where, yeah, I think people felt the need to have similar events happening again, where they could meet with everyone. Because I think, yeah, there is a need for outlining clear goals of what to focus on and making sure that the edtech firms work towards those goals hand in hand with both the end users and the government as well. And so I also mentioned that they're in Rwanda at the moment, they're drafting a policy. I think it's called Digital Transformation Policy. And the edtech firms, so the creators of the content, the creators of the platforms, those that come up with ideas, they were asking to be included in that policy.
Maker and all the different stakeholders, so that there is a kind of like shared knowledge and everyone can tap into the collective intelligence. So you design with the end user, you design for the end user, you co-design with the edtech stakeholders, so that you can really maximize the effort. That is what comes to my mind. I think it's like a very broad conversation actually, so it's what I was also thinking is that one of the key elements when it comes to digital technology and digital learning is that there are so many open source possibilities that we can use and we can leverage. For example, Moodle is one of them, or the activity that was presented yesterday by UNESCO and UNICEF. Those activities exist, it's just a matter of like first market them and also like look into the possibility on how we can leverage them and kind of like make our own products out of them.
All right, last two. Okay, lady and gentlemen. Okay, then there. Okay, Mama. Okay, then Mama will be the last.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is Marilyn Mamuya from Global Outreach Tanzania. And I've worked for my organization for 7 good years on computer literacy. And there is a huge challenge as we work with schools. Today we put in computers in schools, and then we train teachers, and then we train students. And for me, I think of the internet. We keep saying the internet, but in reality, from Tanzania, and some of us are from there, the government says we are putting in internet to every place, every village, and everything. And then whether it's happening or not, the next day, the internet is there and people cannot pay for it, you know? So we ask ourselves these questions. How far do we need to go with the internet? So we came up with
our Tanzanian community where people cannot afford to buy the internet, and if it's there, it's not, it's not working for one reason or the other. So I wish that we begin looking into all of you at how can we convert that towards offline way of learning, because it is more realistic in our African communities if we really think of the rural areas and things of that kind. And the same case to the open of the learning materials that are open to everybody. How can we really incorporate those in our learning environment today? And the other thing that I really wish these people in the digital world can really do, as she said before, how do we really team up to voice out together? Because if I'm global outreach and I'm working this on my own, and if I share a paper of the government, it's just global outreach. Who are you? But if it's the 10 of us sharing this kind of a voice that it brings a better understanding. If I'm saying they should go for online, because in reality the internet is not working, but if it's one, it doesn't make sense. But if we are many, then it brings in more value. So that's my yeah. Okay, so
I think I do fully endorse course, and I love it, and I would like to connect it back to the example from Liberia. I think that we need to really, when we're talking about digital learning and digital technologies, everything needs to be contextualized, and we need to really select and to look into the possibilities that are available and that are most conducive and useful in that context. So having learning through radio or having learning through, I don't know, WhatsApp, rather than going fancy for like the last top-notch technology, that is something that we should look at. So if it works in the online learning as offline context, definitely go for those solutions. If it works in a kind of like radio context or radio situation, I think that you find the perfect way to deliver content and knowledge and really build up skills for people. So definitely it is like an effective way and an effective example. With regard to your question related to how can we help children in understanding how to navigate the web and how to navigate the digital ecosystem, definitely I think there is an urgency in creating digital skills, both from a teacher perspective, but also from student perspective, and this needs to be embedded into the curriculum that we develop. We cannot expect people to already know how to use the internet, how to use the technology, how to look up for content that is relevant and it is tailored to their needs, to their age. So definitely there is an urgency in creating digital skills and knowledge. To your last question regarding methodologies, I didn't get the question though, sorry. I didn't understand if it was a question or a statement, but maybe we can talk after the session.
Yeah, I can also maybe quickly jump in. So yeah, for offline technologies, yeah, of course, like I think, yeah, often when we talk about edtech, we think about a setup like the one here, right? So people joining on Zoom, but edtech is so much more than that. So it can be used in low-tech settings as well. So like radio, accessing radio, even accessing, I think, through like USSD on like simple phones. So I think it's really about leveraging all of the technology to access that. Otherwise, of course, we'll exacerbate this digital divide between people that do not have access to technology and the others. Yeah, so for about the reluctance to technology, I think, yeah, this would be more a question, I think, for the other presentation by Pietro, but it seems that people are actually willing to access technology. In Rwanda, also the teachers are relatively young, I think, probably compared to maybe other countries, so it might be easier for them to or they might be more motivated by technology if they have their whole career that will follow. Yeah, reluctance to pay and be reimbursed. Yeah, this seems to be a clear problem. So yeah, teachers, and I think that came out in the presentation from my colleague Pietro, that and this is something that also the participants in the interviews mentioned. So yeah, they actually are not willing to pay to get some digital training. So yeah, this remains a problem. Yeah, and I think yeah, the question on cost was a very good question. It's true that the purchasing power of people, at least in Rwanda, is very low. So at this stage, I think it still needs to be supported by government and development partners. It's too ambitious to think that end users will be able to pay for edtech solutions. I think not at this stage. But I think like overall the edtech ecosystem, given that it's probably easier to scale up compared to like traditional technologies. You know, if you need to print school material, for example, this will be very costly to replicate in like 100 more schools or 1,000 more schools. While if you have digital material available, you can within seconds share it with, so expand it to more schools. So I think like, yeah, this stage, given that it's like an emerging sector still, it's very costly. But I think in the long term, it will become less costly than traditional methods. Yeah, I hope I'm answering the questions.
Okay, at this point, I want to thank our presenters. Pietro online, thank you very much for the presentation. Also physically, our presenters who are here, thank you. Also the discussants, thank you very much. And also for attending, thank you very much. At this moment, lunch is being served, so we may all proceed for lunch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I have a quick information for lunch. We have a working lunch with UNESCO. So people who want to participate to the working lunch, you go to the Almasi restaurant. It's on the 3rd floor, but you take this elevator, not the one in the main hall right here. So and it's just an event for 60 people. So if you want to go there, you take that elevator. And for every other person, you just take this elevator right here on the main floor, and then you go to the 3rd floor like we did yesterday, and the restaurant is there and lunch is being served. And we come back at 2, exactly 2, to start the closing session. Donc, je reprends en français. Il y a 2 événements. Il y a le déjeuner qui est en train d'être servi au 3e étage. Vous n'avez qu'à aller en haut pour cela, comme hier. Et pour ceux qui veulent participer au side event de UNESCO, vous prenez l'ascenseur qui est à côté, juste à ma gauche, et vous allez au restaurant Almasi. Et voilà, les tickets, les vouchers, vous pouvez les avoir dehors. You can just have the voucher outside if you want to. Thank you so much, and we meet here at 2. Thank you.